been tried with tulips, and it's been tried with various things over time, and it does come to a bad ending.
Zero. Tulip bulbs traded for $75,000 once, something like that. The only value of a Bitcoin is what the other guy will pay for.
Bitcoin, before it bubbled up the way it did, sure, it was a great performing asset. Just like tulip bulbs were a great performing asset, before the bubble popped.
There was some hope that you get a tulip out of it at some point. Bitcoin is at one level a pure speculative game, right? It's a pure bubble.
It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. This quote from Mark Twain hits hard when we look at one of the most misunderstood events in financial history, Tulipmania. And today, we're diving deep into the misconception that Bitcoin is nothing more than a digital tulip bubble. Spoiler alert, it's not. And by the end of this video, you'll not only understand why Bitcoin is fundamentally different, but also why the story of Tulipmania itself is far more complex and far less catastrophic than most people think. Over the years, countless skeptics, from economists to media personalities, have called Bitcoin a bubble, likening it to Tulipmania, the supposed mother of all speculative frenzies. You've probably heard it too. Bitcoin is the new tulip. But is that comparison accurate? The story begins in the Dutch Golden Age, a time of unprecedented wealth and cultural growth. By the early 1600s, tulips, exotic flowers imported from Turkey, had become a symbol of status among the wealthy elite. Collecting rare tulips was a fashion statement, much like owning designer goods today. Their ability to mutate into unique patterns made them even more desirable, creating a frenzy of demand among aristocrats and the emerging merchant class. But there was more to the tulip craze than mere vanity. The Dutch Republic was one of the few places where social mobility was possible. Wealth could elevate you, and owning rare tulips became a way to signal success. At the same time, the Netherlands was awash in money, thanks to a flood of gold and silver from Spanish and Portuguese conquests in the Americas, and the Dutch Republic's unique free coinage laws. The monetary base doubled between 1628 and 1638. This inflationary pressure played a significant role in driving up the prices of tulips, just as excess money supply inflates asset bubbles today. A modern example of this can be seen during the pandemic, when helicopter money was distributed to people while they stayed at home. And we all saw what happened to the price of Bitcoin after that, didn't we? But here's where things get even more interesting. Tulip bulbs weren't just bought and sold outright, because tulips could only be physically exchanged during the summer when they were dug up. Futures contracts emerged as a way to trade them year-round. This allowed speculators to bet on the future price of tulips without ever owning the actual bulbs, a precursor to modern financial markets. But it also led to moral backlash. Futures trading was seen by many as gambling, and critics painted a picture of reckless speculation. Sound familiar? Now, this is where the narrative we've all been told starts to unravel. Some people think Tulipmania consumed the entire Dutch economy and left the country in ruins. That's simply not true. The speculation was largely confined to a small group of wealthy traders, shopkeepers, merchants, and artisans who treated tulip trading as a side hustle. The broader economy was unaffected. In fact, when tulip prices collapsed in February 1637, the impact was limited and localized. The Dutch Republic didn't fall into chaos, and most people carried on with their lives as usual. What really happened after the collapse was a series of unsettled futures contracts. Buyers, seeing their bulbs become nearly worthless, refused to pay. Sellers, unable to enforce these agreements, petitioned local governments for intervention. Since this was an unprecedented situation, the reality was that the government didn't know how to handle it effectively, leading to different outcomes in different areas. Decisions often depended on who had more lobbying power, with the most influential groups managing to sway rulings in their favor. In some cases, cities ruled that buyers could settle contracts by paying just 3.5% of the agreed price. These disputes highlighted deeper issues around trust, commercial integrity, and the nature of value itself. Tulipmania wasn't just a story of financial excess, it forced society to grapple with uncomfortable questions about materialism, risk-taking, and what truly makes something valuable. Now, let's bring this back to Bitcoin. Unlike tulips, Bitcoin isn't a luxury item or a fleeting fashion trend. It's a revolutionary digital asset with a hard cap of 21 million coins. Each Bitcoin is fungible, divisible, and secured by a decentralized blockchain that has been operating almost flawlessly for over 15 years. Its scarcity is absolute. No amount of rising prices can increase its supply, unlike tulips or even gold, where higher prices incentivize more mining. Sure, Bitcoin has experienced wild price swings, and skeptics love to point to its parabolic rises and sharp corrections as evidence of a bubble. But here's the key difference. After every correction, Bitcoin has recovered, reaching new highs. These cycles aren't signs of failure, they're proof of a growing and maturing asset class. The speculative frenzy around tulips, by contrast, ended abruptly and permanently. Tulip prices never recovered, and their value as a speculative asset vanished. Another critical distinction lies in utility. Tulips, while beautiful, had limited functional value beyond reproduction, which is also inflation. Bitcoin, on the other hand, represents an entirely new financial system. It's decentralized, resistant to censorship, and offers a store of value independent of any government or central bank. It's being adopted globally, used for remittances, saving, and even as a hedge against inflation if you have the right approach. And let's address the elephant in the room. The claim that Bitcoin is only valuable because people believe someone else will pay more for it, the so-called greater fool theory. While this critique applies to any form of money, including fiat currencies, it misses the point. Bitcoin's value doesn't come from a central authority declaring it so. It comes from its decentralized nature, its provable scarcity, and the trust people have in its technology. Over time, as more people understand how Bitcoin works and its role in a digital economy, its value continues to grow, not because of hype, but because of utility. The story of Tulipmania, it's often cited as the first speculative bubble in history, a cautionary tale about human folly. But when you dig deeper, it's clear the narrative has been sensationalized. Tulipmania wasn't a catastrophic economic collapse. It was a localized speculative frenzy that left most of the Dutch economy unscathed. Similarly, calling Bitcoin a bubble ignores its foundational differences and its role as a transformative technology. So the next time someone compares Bitcoin to the tulip bubble, ask them this: are you basing that on headlines or history? Because history shows us that Tulipmania was far more complex than the myths suggest. And Bitcoin, it's not a flower, it's the future. Subscribe to the channel if you found this video informative, and remember to stay curious and stay hodling.